The moment my brother-in-law pointed at me across the boardroom table and said, "She forged those documents," and we all know it, I felt the floor tilt beneath me, not metaphorically. My hands gripped the edge of the table, my vision narrowed. And somewhere behind me I heard my husband, the man I'd spent 22 years building a life with, say nothing. That silence was louder than anything Owen had ever said. I need to back up, because none of this started in that boardroom. It started the way most quiet disasters do. Slowly, with small things I kept telling myself didn't matter. My name is Audrey. I'm 51 years old, and until about 18 months ago, I was the kind of woman who believed that if you worked hard enough, kept your head down, and loved your family with everything you had, things would eventually work out. I was a licensed property appraiser for 24 years. I built my career from a part-time admin position at a real estate firm in Mississauga, took my courses at night while my kids were small, and eventually started my own appraisal practice. By the time I was 45, I had a client list that kept me booked 3 months out and a reputation I was quietly proud of. My husband Martin worked in commercial insurance. We had 2 kids, our son Bryce, who was 19 and studying engineering at McMaster, and our daughter Jenna, who was 16 and already more capable than most adults I knew. We owned a semi-detached in Oakville that we'd renovated ourselves over 8 years, one weekend at a time. We had RRSPs, a joint TFSA, a modest investment account. Nothing flashy. Just the kind of steady, ordinary financial life that takes decades to build, and about 48 hours to destroy if the wrong person decides to reach for it. Martin's father, Harold, passed away in March 2 years ago. Harold was a quiet man, widowed young, who'd spent 30 years working for the city of Hamilton in infrastructure planning. He wasn't wealthy by any stretch, but he was careful. When he died, he left behind a paid-off house in Stony Creek, worth just over $680,000, a registered retirement income fund with roughly $190,000 remaining, and a small life insurance policy for $75,000. He had 2 sons, Martin, my husband, and Owen, who was 4 years younger and had never quite found his footing in any lasting way. Owen had done 3 different college programs, worked a series of jobs that never lasted more than 2 years, and had been separated from his wife for a while. He lived in a rental in Burlington and, as far as I could tell, spent most of his time resenting the life he thought he should have had. Harold's will was straightforward. He'd written it with a lawyer in 2019 and updated it in 2021. The estate was to be split equally between Martin and Owen, with one condition. The family home was to be sold within 12 months of Harold's death, and proceeds divided after expenses. Harold had told Martin directly, in one of their last real conversations, that he wanted the house sold. He didn't want either son to feel obligated to maintain it, and he especially didn't want it to become a source of conflict. It became a source of conflict within 3 weeks. Owen didn't want to sell. Or rather, Owen wanted to keep the house, buy out Martin's share at a price well below market value, and use his half of the RRIF to cover the difference, an arrangement that would have left Martin with significantly less than what Harold intended. Martin told him no. Owen pushed. Martin told him no again. And then, somewhere around week 6, Owen stopped talking to Martin and started talking to a lawyer instead. I didn't think much of it at first. Estates are complicated. Grief makes people do strange things. I'd seen it before. Families that seemed fine until money entered the picture. I told Martin to be patient, to let the estate lawyer handle it, and to give Owen time to come around. What I did not know, what I had absolutely no way of knowing, was that Owen had already started laying the groundwork for something else entirely. The first sign came in July, about 4 months after Harold died. Martin came home from work one evening and told me, casually, that he'd asked Owen to hold off on signing the listing agreement for the Stony Creek house for a few more weeks. He said Owen wanted to do some research on comparable sales first. "I thought you said he was being unreasonable about the price," I said. "He's coming around," Martin said. "He didn't look at me when he said it. I let it go. In August, I noticed that our joint TFSA had been accessed. I'd set up email alerts years ago for any transactions over $500. I'd received no alert. When I logged in, I saw a withdrawal of $11,000 from 3 weeks earlier. I called Martin immediately. I needed to cover something for the estate, he said. "Temporary, I'll put it back." "Martin, that's our tax-free account. You can't just, you need to tell me." I said, "I'll put it back. It's fine." It was not fine. But I didn't know yet how not fine it was. In September, I received a letter from a law firm in Hamilton that I'd never heard of. It was addressed to me by name, and it informed me that I was being named as a respondent in a civil action related to the estate of Harold. The claim alleged that I had, without authorization, prepared and submitted a fraudulent property appraisal of the Stony Creek house, an appraisal that had been used to support a lower valuation for estate purposes, and that this appraisal bore my professional stamp and signature. I read the letter 4 times. Then I sat down on the kitchen floor, which is something I have never done before or since. I am a licensed property appraiser. My stamp, my signature, and my RICA registration number are things I guard with the same care most people reserve for their SIN card. I had never appraised Harold's house. I had never been asked to. I had never set foot inside it as a professional, and I had certainly never submitted any document to any estate process on Harold's behalf. But someone had. I called my professional liability insurer that afternoon. Then I called my own lawyer, a woman named Audrey I'd retained for a business matter years earlier and had kept her number ever since. Then I sat down at my desk and started pulling every file I had, every email, every calendar entry, every log of work I'd done in the months surrounding Harold's death, trying to find anything that could explain how my name ended up on a document I'd never created. Martin, when I showed him the letter, said it must be a mistake. Owen wouldn't do this, he said. Then who did? I asked. He didn't answer. The weeks that followed were some of the worst of my life. My insurer launched their own investigation. Adrian retained a forensic document examiner to analyze the appraisal, the one bearing my name, that had been filed with the estate. The estate lawyer, once informed, froze proceedings pending the outcome. Owen's lawyer issued a statement saying Owen had received the appraisal through proper channels and had no knowledge of how it was obtained. I want to tell you that Martin stood beside me through all of this. I want to say that clearly. But the truth is more complicated, and I've spent a long time deciding whether to include it, and I've decided that leaving it out would make this story dishonest. Martin did not stand beside me. Not the way I needed. He came to some of the meetings. He sat next to me at Adrian's office and nodded when she explained things. But at home in the evenings, when it was just the two of us, he was somewhere else entirely. He stopped asking how I was feeling. He started taking calls in the garage. When I asked him directly whether he had any idea how that document had been created, he said he didn't, and then he looked out the window, and I filed that look somewhere in the back of my mind where I kept things I wasn't yet ready to examine. In October, my professional license was placed under review by the Appraisal Institute of Canada pending the outcome of the civil matter. I had to notify my active clients. I had to pause my practice. I had been working continuously for 24 years, and in the space of 6 weeks, I had gone from fully booked to unable to work. Jenna noticed. She was 16 and she noticed everything. One night she came into the kitchen where I was sitting with a cup of tea I'd forgotten to drink, and she sat down across from me and said, "Mom, what's actually happening?" I told her some of it, the parts I thought she was ready for. "Is it Dad?" she asked. I said I didn't know. And I hated that I said that to my 16-year-old, but I couldn't make myself say anything else. Bryce came home from Hamilton for Thanksgiving, and I watched him and Martin interact all weekend with this careful, studied normalcy that made my chest hurt. Bryce knew something was wrong but didn't ask. Martin performed fine. I performed fine. We ate turkey and watched the Raptors, and nobody said what any of us were actually thinking. The mediation was scheduled for the second week of November. It was not a court proceeding, not yet. It was a formal mediation session between Owen's legal team, the estate lawyer, and my lawyer, with me and Martin also present. The intent was to resolve the civil claim without going to litigation. I did not sleep the night before. I went through every piece of documentation Adrian had prepared, every exhibit, every line of the forensic report. The document examiner, a woman with 30 years of experience who had testified in provincial court proceedings more times than I could count, had concluded with high confidence that the signature on the fraudulent appraisal was not mine. The stamp had been digitally reproduced. The registration number had been correctly copied, but the surrounding formatting was inconsistent with my actual software output. There were metadata traces on the digital file that pointed to a computer and a user account that were not mine. I knew all of this. I had read it, I believed it, and I was still terrified. The mediation was held in a boardroom on the 14th floor of a building on King Street in Hamilton. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a long oval table. Owen arrived with 2 lawyers. Martin sat beside me, which I appreciated. Adrian was on my other side. The estate lawyer sat at the end. For the first hour, Owen's lead lawyer laid out their position. The appraisal existed, it bore my credentials, it had been submitted in a way that suggested professional involvement. Owen had relied on it in good faith. The estate had been affected, therefore I was liable. I sat there and I listened to this, and I kept my hands flat on the table so they wouldn't shake. Then it was Adrian's turn. She walked through the forensic report methodically and without drama. She was the kind of lawyer who didn't raise her voice because she never needed to. She presented the metadata analysis. She presented a comparison of the formatting differences. She presented the document examiner's signed statement. She presented my practice records showing no site visit, no client file, no invoice, no correspondence related to the Stony Creek property in any form. Owen's lawyer argued that records could be deleted, that the absence of a file proved nothing. And then the estate lawyer, a man named Paul who had been quiet for most of the morning, set a document on the table and asked if anyone wanted to explain it. It was a text message exchange between Owen and Martin, printed from a backup Paul had requested as part of the estate file audit. In it, Owen and Martin discussed the appraisal in a way that made very clear that the appraisal had not arrived through any proper channel. Martin had suggested, in writing, in a text, that using my credentials would make the lower valuation more credible, because I was a licensed professional and it would be harder to question. That was when I felt the floor tilt. I turned to look at Martin. He was staring at the document. His face had gone the color of old paper. I didn't say anything. I didn't trust my voice. Adrian set her pen down very carefully. Owen's lawyers asked for a recess. The estate lawyer said he was obligated to report the text exchange to the relevant authorities. My insurer's representative, who had been sitting quietly in the corner for the entire session, was already on his phone. The recess lasted 40 minutes. When we came back, Owen's lawyers had revised their position considerably. The civil claim against me was withdrawn in full. The estate was ordered back into proper proceedings under the original terms of the will. A referral was made to the Ontario Provincial Police's Financial Crimes Unit. Because submitting fraudulent professional documentation in an estate proceeding is a criminal matter, not just a civil one. Owen was charged with fraud under the Criminal Code of Canada 7 weeks later. Martin was named as a person of interest pending further investigation, which is not a charge, but it is also not nothing. I want to tell you what happened with Martin because I think you deserve to know the whole of it, and it's because I have had a long time to sit with it, and I no longer feel the need to protect him from the truth of what he did. He called me the night after the mediation. He'd driven to Owen's place and then apparently driven around for 3 hours before calling. He said he was sorry. He said he'd told himself it wasn't really hurting me, that it was just paperwork, that Owen had convinced him the valuation was fair, and this was only about making it official. He said he'd stopped it from going further, which was not true, because the document had already been filed before I ever received that letter. He said a lot of things. I listened. I let him talk. And when he was done, I said, "You let them use my professional license as a weapon against me, in our own family. And you said nothing while I spent 6 weeks thinking I was going to lose everything I built." He said he knew. He said he was sorry again. I said, "I know you are. I don't think that changes much right now. We separated in December. I am not going to tell you that was easy, because it wasn't. 22 years is 22 years. There were days that winter when I genuinely did not know how I was going to get out of bed." Jenna was furious in a way that was both completely understandable and occasionally terrifying to witness. Bryce went quiet in the way he does when he's hurt, retreated into school, into his roommates, into a version of life that didn't require him to deal with the family falling apart at home. What kept me moving honestly was Adrian, and my insurer's review board, and a colleague named Priya, who had been in the industry almost as long as I had and who sat across from me at a coffee shop in Port Credit in January and said, "Your license is going to be reinstated. I've seen the file. You did nothing wrong. Come back." The Appraisal Institute cleared me in February. Full reinstatement, no conditions, no record on my professional file. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, and I read it standing at my kitchen counter, and then I cried for about 20 minutes, which I think was reasonable. My practice came back slowly, the way things do when they've been interrupted but not destroyed. A few of my original clients called when they heard the news through the industry grapevine, because in a professional community that size, word travels. By April I was working again. By June I was booked out 6 weeks. Not where I'd been, but moving in the right direction. Owen's criminal matter is still making its way through the system, as these things do in Canada. Slowly, with multiple appearances and remands, and the particular grinding patience required by anyone who expects justice to be fast. His lawyer entered a not guilty plea. There is a trial date set for next spring. I have been told I may be called as a witness. Martin was not charged. The investigation concluded that he had been a participant in the planning conversations, but had not personally created or filed the document. Whether that distinction feels meaningful to you probably depends on what you think participation means. It doesn't feel particularly meaningful to me. We are formally separated. The family home is in the process of being sold. We have a separation agreement that Adrian negotiated, which I will say was thorough and fair, as she always is. Martin and I do not speak except about the kids. He has asked, twice, whether there is a path forward. I have not closed that door entirely. I want to be honest about that, but I also have not opened it, and I don't know when or whether I will. Some things, once you know them, become part of how you see a person. And I see Martin differently now than I did a year ago. I don't know if that changes back. What I do know is this. Jenna started a personal finance class at her school this spring, and she came home one evening and told me about compound interest and TFSAs, and she was so earnest about it, explaining it like she'd discovered something important. And I sat there listening and thinking about how she was going to be so much more careful than I was. Not because I was careless. I wasn't. But because she's going to grow up knowing that the people closest to you are not automatically the safest ones to trust with the things you built. That's not cynicism. I don't think I'm cynical. I think I've just learned to be clearer about the difference between love and safety, and to understand that you can have one without the other. Bryce came home for the long weekend in May. We grilled in the backyard, just the three of us because that's who we are now, and at some point he said, "I'm proud of you, Mom." Just like that, out of nowhere, while he was turning sausages on the grill. I didn't know what to say, which is unusual for me. "For what?" I asked. He shrugged. "For not letting it take you down." I thought about that for a long time afterward. About what it means not to let something take you down. About how that's not always a choice you make once, dramatically, in a boardroom with floor-to-ceiling windows. Sometimes it's just getting up on a Tuesday, making the call, going to the meeting, doing the work, trusting that what you built is still there, underneath everything that happened to it. My name is Audrey. I have been a licensed property appraiser for 24 years. My license is in good standing. My practice is running. My kids are okay. And I still know how to tell the difference between a fair valuation and a fraudulent one. I've always known that. Nobody, it turns out, could take that away.